Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. We are tenure-track faculty members in the sciences, working at a primarily undergraduate university in California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss.
Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Ruth.
And I'm Claire. And today we're going to talk about homework. But first, Ruth, how was your week?
My week was good. I reached a new milestone in my life where I cut my children's hair. So that was exciting.
Ooh.
Yes, I was concerned they were going to lose their minds because it's quite short. But they're just so happy to not have the terrible hair brushing that they were having before. So it was all good. And they can't see at the back, so they don't know how lopsided it is. So it's fine.
Perfect.
So it's, yeah. But it was definitely intense.
That sounds like
I had a rather unfortunate haircut experience where I cut my own hair after a bad breakup. And it did not go as well as this experience. So this was definitely...
You have more practice now, I guess.
Yes. So how was your week?
It was good. One of the things I wanted to talk about was I was working with my research students on educational stuff. They were helping me,
cool.
Or they are helping me develop materials for a class that I teach in the fall. And they were revamping our ideas for homework, or at least we were discussing revamping it. And so we were brainstorming options. And it was just really cool to work with students who had just recently taken the class to think about how to revamp it and all that. So I feel excited to talk more about homework today.
Wow, okay, you've kind of inspired me because one of my research students for the summer just finished my class that I'm going to be teaching in the fall.
Ooh.
So I should totally schedule a meeting with him and sort of chat about homework. That is a really cool idea.
I hadn't really thought about engaging my research students with class questions like that before, but I'm totally into it. Super into it. They've got great ideas.
Cool. So I was wondering first about homework. Could I tell you just before we get into the... Oh, never mind. Okay, hang on. Slow my roll. Quote first.
Okay, quote. I've got a quote that I want to tell you from Zig Ziglar. Do you know Zig Ziglar? No. He's a motivational speaker, personal development training guy. And his quote is, "Repetition is the mother of learning, the father of action, which makes it the architect of accomplishment." Which made me think of homework, of course. So we'll get into repetition.
And it kind of actually, it sort of calls me to thinking about the amount of times we talked about all the stuff we want to do as being a practice. You know, and we have to keep coming back and just repeating, like drawing ourselves back to repeating over and over again what it is we want to do. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, everything is a practice. That's a really good point. So what did you want to kick us off with about homework?
Well, I think I wanted to just tell you a little bit about the differences in my experience of being an undergrad in Ireland and then a grad student in America, and then the experience that students have here. And I think I'm definitely speaking about a time in Ireland that was like quite a long time ago, so it may not be the case these days. But when I was a student in Ireland, it was very, like, you were just kind of left alone for the whole semester. And you didn't, like most classes, I didn't even have midterms. Like, you just did the final exam and that was it. And kind of as I was leaving, it was moving more and more towards kind of having these projects and sort of points accumulate throughout the semester. But so the concept of homework as like a graded thing was completely alien to me until there was one point in my third year in college where we had these homework assignments. And it was interesting because that professor, Tony Cafola, had been in grad school in America. And I think he was really like, yes, homework. And I remember doing these homework assignments and it was so all encompassing and like super exciting and working on stuff really late, trying to figure it out. And that was when I kind of fell in love with the concept of homework. And then, I mean, fell in love with like in a sort of weird toxic relationship, kind of like it's so awful and terrible, but then it's good in the end. So, but so I was kind of just like, I think the kind of practice of having very regular graded homework be part of the class is not necessarily, like, it's not a global thing necessarily. Sure. I mean, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, I really am into homework in a big way. So that was really my preface.
So in the classes where there was no homework and it was just the final, were there like book problems you could do if you wanted to, or was it pretty much, I mean, yeah, how did it go?
I think sometimes there was book problems that you could do if you wanted to do, and there was definitely usually some kind of like activity problem solving sessions and stuff. So it wasn't completely, you know, but the kind of concept that your grade consisted of more than just that, what you got in that final exam,
I see,
was not one I was really used to. So that was kind of a big difference. And even my year that I went to college was the first year we had semesters. And before that, it had been an entire year. And then you did exams at the end of the year.
Oh, wow.
Like for the entire 2 semesters. So, yeah, so having even semesters was like, whoa, that's a big intervention. So,
wow.
And of course, things are very different now. But yeah, so I think I had no concept of, like, it was definitely something you could put everything off till the end and then cram everything. And then when I went to grad school here, and it was just these constant homework assignments, there's no kind of taking your foot off the gas.
Sure. And it does vary, of course, school to school and class to class. And I think it was more common here a little while ago to be just the final exam. So there's variety, of course, here as well. But yeah, that's really interesting to think about, that international variety.
So tell me, what is working for you with homework?
So I guess the general concept of having weekly graded homework is what is working for me. And so a couple aspects about that. I choose to do a weekly repeating schedule. So homework is due at the beginning of class Monday each week consistently. And there's lots of compelling arguments to do it other ways, where you have like a topic and you cover a whole topic, and then you have a homework assignment for that topic, and it's not necessarily every week. So that's like going for a little more cohesion. I'm choosing a little more consistency, and the students can get used to a schedule. So yeah, I like to have...
I think that's so important.
I think it's helpful. You know, they get a routine and whatnot, and I try to have the homework assignments be fairly consistent in length. And then, of course, yeah, sometimes it'll have the end of one topic and the beginning of another, but I think it's worth it to me for the cohesion. So yeah, the weekly part, I like having that. And then the graded part, I think, is really important. Currently, I'm doing online homeworks for the graded aspect. And the reason I think graded is so important is because, of course, with optional homework, it's easier to accidentally get behind or to skim through the problems and not really notice that there's some subtle variations that make it more complicated or something like that. And my colleague who teaches the same class I do noticed that when he added graded homework, the grade distribution shifted, where previously there had been like one group of students that was a nice normal distribution that was kind of doing well, and then there was another normal distribution of students who wasn't really doing well. And then when he added the graded homework, it just became one normal distribution that was pretty doing well. So it like moved that lower group up. So anyway, yeah, having weekly graded homework, I'm into. And I think it works well for having people keep up and be sure to actually do the repetition and the problems and all that.
I think that's awesome. And I think students are very aware of what we give weight to. So if you don't give any weight, as in a part of the grade to homework, it's kind of like, I don't know. I have a lot of like issues about grades and stuff in general, but I think that's the kind of currency we have, is sort of saying worth. And so I think it's super important to give that graded homework. Like, it's super important.
Yeah,
to show,
it's the currency, and it's also our way of
do.
Just in general emphasizing what we want them to be spending their time on, you know?
It's funny what you're saying about the schedule, because I think it's really important to have it always be the same day. You know, and I think, like, when I was in grad school, you know, sometimes you'd only be taking one course so you could keep track. Like, it didn't matter. But when they're taking so many classes, they need to know. But it was funny, I had one class where I kind of really believe in that, and I always have the same things due on the same day. And one student in the evaluations was like, God, I just wish you could have had some consistency to when things were due. And I was like, but there was. But it's just really funny how, yeah, even when you are actually doing that, it still feels kind of chaotic to some people. So
Sure.
I think it's well worth having that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it goes to show that it's always, more communication is always better, you know? Even if you feel like you've said it a million times before, it doesn't hurt to say something again.
No. And sometimes I felt like I was being really patronizing, because I'd be like, what are we doing on Friday? Handing in the homework. And someone will still come in and be like, what, the homework was due? Or, you know, so yeah, totally. You cannot say things enough, for sure.
So what's working for you for homework?
I think I kind of had a big evolution with homework.
Oh, interesting.
I think what I've finally done is given up on the textbook problems for homework. And I kind of, when I first started teaching, I gave like this huge portion of the grade to homework. So I was like, homework is so important. And I guess I was just stupid and didn't know about solution manuals. And so basically everybody would just transcribe the solution manuals, and everyone's grade was inflated by like 15% or something. So
without getting the practice.
Right. And it was kind of almost comical, because there would be these crazy typos in the solution manuals, like symbols that didn't make any sense that would like show up in the homework. And you were like, oh man, this is not what I was trying to get at with this. And I think a lot of people have come up with creative ways of getting around that. Like, you know, even if people have the solution manuals, if you say there's going to be a quiz on one of these problems next week, like they're going to engage with it a bit deeper. But so I think for me, I was doing the book problems at first. Then I started doing WebAssign. And I was like, haha, I'm going to like, now I will solve the problem. But then the students told me they would just copy the text and put it into Google, and it would still take them to, because I think a lot of those problems are just book problems with slightly different numbers. So they could figure out what they were. And again, sometimes you're like, if you use that creativity to just solve the problem, you probably would get it done quicker than trying to find the solution. But anyway, so then I finally have landed where I am right now, and I'm happy with it, with some reservations, where I just make up problems. And so what I do for homework each week is I give them like 10 book problems that are suggested, like these are ones you should do and practice, and then I make up 2 and say these are the ones that will be graded.
I see. So you just grade 2, but they have more to practice.
Yeah, and totally. And so I think, I mean, the downside is that I'm not a professional problem writer, and sometimes it's so clear to me, like, you jump over the baby ducks and this is what should be happening, and they're like, what are you trying to say? So there's definitely, I'm not as good at writing problems as textbook problem writers are, but I think it's really cool because I definitely noticed an engagement level really like ramped up when I started doing those problems. And one student said on my evaluations, this sucks, I can't find the solutions to her homeworks anywhere online. And I was like, sweet, that's a victory. That was what I was going for. So yeah. So I think some of this kind of belief system for me comes from going down the wrong path with solution manuals myself. Like, we didn't have them for homework, but do you guys have, in chemistry, did you have a qualifying exam that you had to do?
Like in our graduate school?
Like in...
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think for me, I bought these books that were like worked problems. Like it gave like example problems and then the solution to them. And I just studied those so diligently. And then I still couldn't solve any problems because I never just sat down and tried it myself. So I think my biggest thing with them is like, I will help them no matter, like, literally cheerlead them the whole way through the problem. But just that practice of sitting down with the problem and not knowing how to start it, that feels like that's where the magic happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm
definitely
into it. Yeah.
I love that system because that is the balance, of course, is practice is necessary, but then how do you grade them? And how do you, like, if you were to write every single problem and grade every single problem, that would just be your whole job. So I like this balance of just taking a couple problems. That's good. That's cool.
Yeah, cool. So what about, what are you working on?
Well, I'm working on how to grade homework. So this is a good suggestion you just had. Yeah, so there's a few options, of course. Grading all the problems thoroughly is an option, but I'm just going to throw that out right now. That takes too much time, you know? So that's not really an option. Online homework, of course, is an option, and it's definitely getting better and better. And you can write your own questions, at least on some of the platforms, which is great to help avoid that copy-paste searching effort. And also helps, you know, make the questions more like exactly what I want them to be working on. So that's a good option. Another option that was what my general chemistry professor did is doing like a quick check, you know? You're supposed to do however many problems, and then she just did a quick, like, flip through. Does it look like you did most of them? Done. And so I'm considering doing a similar thing of having them take pictures of their work and just upload it to our learning management system, which is Canvas, and then I just say, oh yeah, look, they did all the problems. Moving on. So I guess the reason I would want to do that is because it would be getting away from some of the tricky aspects of online with, you know, slightly wrong questions or slightly wrong answers being, you know, the frustrations of entering a 0 instead of an O or something like that. So you could get away from that, but still have a pretty quick way of checking the homework, doing it that way. So I haven't actually tried that way yet, but I'm kind of excited about that idea.
Do you have student graders? Is that a thing in your department? We
don't.
Oh, we do. So that definitely changes things for me, for sure, because, yeah,
so
that is a shame.
How does that work? Do they grade the 2 problems that you write, or how does that work?
Yeah, so they grade the 2 problems, like, in reasonable detail. And so, yeah, like, and the ones I've had in the past have just been so great, I haven't really had to check anything. And so that works really well. And last semester, we did what you said, where they uploaded a, like, PDF of their homework, and then she was able to go through and grade it online.
And how did that work?
That worked out really well. I think what I would do this year, though, is I'm going to be a little bit more consistent in making a rubric. So it's just easier for her to go through and do it. But she kind of just wrote little comments on each person, like, and that worked out fine. But I'm sure if we had a rubric, it would be easier.
Totally.
Yeah. And yeah.
Well, one of the things I've been working on, so I haven't had a grader, but with my research students that are doing the educational side, they've been working on writing problems that, like, slowly increase in difficulty, and then they trade them and make sure that because, you know, that the thing you were saying of it can make perfect sense in whoever wrote its mind, but that doesn't mean that it'll make sense to someone else. So then they trade and they read each other's and make sure that it makes sense. So anyway, that's another way to get some questions written. Cool.
Yeah, I like it. And then you could get them to write the solutions even better.
Yeah.
It's sweet too.
So what are you working on?
I think something I'm really working on, and it's sort of changed a little bit now, but it's the solutions. And so they want the solutions, obviously, and I don't want to give them solutions because I don't want to make new homework problems every single time. Or like, I don't know. I think what I would like to do is sort of build a bank of homework problems myself. And then I could just switch, this time it's these 2 or this time it's the other 2. And I think I have some quandaries about giving a numerical answer. Because in my experience in the past, sometimes if you have a numerical answer, I just keep mashing things into the calculator until I get the right number. Do you know what I mean? And so sometimes having people work towards a number, but then I think I'm revisiting that now that we're going to be online, because like when we were back in the day when we got to meet 4 times a week, it's not a huge burden on the students to be like, you can just ask me, like I will tell you if it's the right answer. like they had many opportunities to do that. But so I think when they're online, I think I'm going to start to giving them a numerical answer that they should be working towards. But I don't know about the solutions.
Yeah, okay. So the whole written out answers, you don't want those out there because then they'll be out there.
Then it sort of defeats the purpose, right? And like, yeah.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I have not really worried about giving out the numerical answers before, but I see what you mean about if you can just check and then you're like, oh, maybe I should divide by 2. Oh, I do need to divide by 2. Where should I divide by 2? That's maybe less of a learning experience than noticing that you should have divided by 2 in the problem.
I know, but now that I'm even saying it, I feel like I'm just being a jerk because it's like, you know, because it's not like there's nothing wrong with giving people a bit of a security blanket and they still have to provide the written out answer. It's not like,
yeah,
you know, yeah. I think definitely now, because like I said, if they don't have as much opportunity to interact with you, I should give them that security blanket. But yeah, now I'm just like representing both sides of my own argument by myself. Sorry.
Well, one of the cool ideas that my students came up with about that was we're kind of making a bunch of problems, like I say, that increase in difficulty, and we have different levels. And level 4 is like all mixed problems from all the different levels, as complicated as possible. And so we were thinking about the idea of having levels 1, 2, and 3. The answers are there, not written out, but just the numerical answer. But then level 4, the answers aren't there, and you hand in the homework before you see the answers. So, like, you have plenty of time to do all the practice with checking the answers, but then you have to, you know, double check yourself without knowing whether you got the right answer for the level 4. I love
that.
I think that's a pretty cool idea.
That's super creative. And it's kind of like, I don't really fully understand it, but you know all that Bloom's taxonomy stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Where it's like, you know, that the levels of learning, and it feels like that really is scaffolding the whole experience. Because it's...
So Bloom's taxonomy
like you should obviously give people...
It's like the different...
Sorry,
you engage, or you listen, or you... How does that work again?
Yeah, it's like I think like kind of, I'm almost like, I wish I hadn't brought this up because I'm not able to describe it properly, but it sort of like has like these different levels of understanding. It's sort of like repetition or like memorization would be the lowest one. And then, you know, just those kind of things. But like, I really like the idea of kind of scaffolding those problems, but then even the fact of not having the answer, that is a different level, right?
Sure,
like that's a different level of understanding.
Yeah.
I really like that idea.
Cool, yeah. Well, like I say, I haven't tried it yet, but it sounds really cool. I'm excited about it. So yeah, what are you...
And it's kind of...
Go ahead.
I kind of also am working a little bit about... I guess I'm really struggling with how to do labs for the upcoming semester. And I feel like some of the labs kind of will be homework, and I don't know whether, you know, because we're not going to necessarily meet for the whole 3 hours
of
to
the
do labs.
Spot.
So I kind of, and I'm kind of wondering, have you ever had students do group projects? Like, is that a reasonable thing to be like, okay, you're all going to meet each other for, you know, whatever amount of time, and you're going to work on this online simulation lab together?
I have never done that virtually, but it sounds like a great idea to me. I've definitely done group projects where they work together in class in person, and it seems like it would translate nicely to a virtual group, especially since they already all have the same time block free. You can provide the Zoom meeting for them if you want to. And
oh, I like that. Yeah. Cool. Okay, cool. Lots to think about homework in general, but especially going into the semester we're going into.
That's one of the things I was thinking about the fall too, is moving away from online homework, in particular because this fall students are spending so much time on their computers already. I'd rather have them spend time with paper for the homework, you know? So,
dude, right? Because that's like, I feel like I'm this like old-fashioned dinosaur or something, but I'm like, I kind of want them to sit down with their quill or something, and like, I don't know what it is, but it feels like there's some tactile something about just sitting and working on stuff on paper. And
totally.
Yeah. And I do really believe for the class, I'm teaching the first physics sequence, and it feels like a really big skill set that I want them to have is being able to lay out a problem in a really readable way. Like that all feels really important. And a lot of people come in with kind of dramatic notions about like scribbling stuff on the back of envelopes, and that means you're like hardcore physicist or something.
I see.
But like I try and have like some conversation about communication, and for someone to be able to follow the thread of what your problem is super important. Like that's a part of actually being a physicist. And
totally.
Yeah, interesting.
Cool. Well, lots to think about.
Pen.
I love your ideas. I'm totally going to incorporate that into mine.
Yeah, I like the scaffolded levels. That's super cool. Okay, cool. Thanks so much, dude.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener, and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.